The opposition and some Labour MPs said the risks of appointing Mandleson had been obvious from the start and accused the Prime Minister of being deliberately incurious about the security checks.
The Prime Minister knew that appointing Mandleson was an enormous risk. He decided it was a risk worth taking. A catastrophic error of judgment.
Does he believe himself to be gullible, incompetent, or both?
He appointed Mandleson despite knowing that he was a threat to our national security. He said due process was followed, having failed to follow that process himself, and he pressured the Foreign Office into signing off on this appointment.
You won't believe what just went down. Keir Starmer got absolutely roasted by a Labour MP over the Peter Mandleson scandal and his lies about the appointment. What blew up isn't just a terrible appointment, but a full-blown mess where outrage, security risks, backroom deals, and total leadership failure all collided at once. So, tell me, how does a man who can't even ask the basic questions about security vetting expect to lead a country?
We know the Prime Minister personally appointed Peter Mandleson to be our ambassador to the United States. We know that Mandleson had a close relationship with a convicted paedophile. We know that he had concerning links with Russia and China, links that had already raised red flags.
A Labour MP stood up in the Commons and completely destroyed the Prime Minister in front of the entire country. No hesitation. Just a full, brutal, public dismantling of the man sitting at the top of the British government.
If we cannot trust our Prime Minister to tell the truth about this ambassadorial appointment, the whole, full truth, a key appointment in Britain's national security architecture, it calls into question the assurances he gives us on everything else.
And you want to know what made it even more devastating? The silence from Labour's own benches afterward. Nobody rushed to defend him. Just silence. And that silence spoke louder than any accusation ever could. So what exactly blew this whole thing wide open? One name, Peter Mandleson.
The truth in this entire process is that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom chose to proactively ignore the victims of Jeffrey Epstein when he made the political choice to put Peter Mandleson in as the UK's most senior diplomat in the United States of America, despite knowing that he had maintained a friendship with Jeffrey Epstein himself.
Keir Starmer appointed Peter Mandleson as UK ambassador to the United States. On the surface, a bold political move. Underneath it, a catastrophic judgment failure that is now threatening to consume his entire premiership. Because here's what you need to understand about Mandleson. This is a man who has resigned from government not once, but twice in disgrace. A man whose ties to Jeffrey Epstein were documented. A man whose connections to Russian interests raised serious alarm bells in intelligence circles. These were not secrets buried in classified files. This information was available, accessible, known, and Starmer appointed him anyway.
That when Peter Mandleson failed the security vetting, he was allowed to continue in the role with access to top secret intelligence and security information. This goes beyond propriety and ethics. This is a matter of national security.
The question that is now burning through Westminster is not just what Starmer knew. The question is why he didn't want to know. When Starmer was finally pressed on the security vetting failure surrounding Mandelson's appointment, his answer was staggering. He claimed he had no idea that Mandleson had failed his security vetting until April 14th, months.
That Mandleson had failed security vetting. These allegations were on the front page of a national newspaper. And yet, Number 10 did not deny the story. Why? 3. Will the Prime Minister repeat from the dispatch box his words last week that no one in Number 10 was aware before Tuesday that Mandleson had failed his vetting?
Months passed between the appointment and the moment the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom apparently discovered that his hand-picked U.S. ambassador could not pass basic security checks. You are being asked to believe that Number 10, the most powerful political office in Britain, was operating completely in the dark about a vetting failure of this magnitude. For months.
I'm afraid the fact that he even had to make the statement today shows how badly he has failed. how badly he has let down the millions of people across our country who are so desperate for change. He blames his officials. He says he had no idea. He gives every impression of a Prime Minister in office, but not in power.
Do you actually believe that? Because the British public is increasingly saying no. This is where it stops being about one bad appointment and starts being about something far more alarming. Either the Prime Minister was deliberately kept out of the loop by senior officials, which is a governance catastrophe, or he simply never asked. And somehow, the second possibility is even worse.
The Prime Minister is now asking us to believe that no one in government thought to tell him or his team that Mandleson had failed vetting, that the first he heard about it was on Tuesday night. This is preposterous. He is taking the public for fools. We know that Number 10 was told that Mandleson had failed his vetting because journalists told them in September last year.
Because what kind of leader appoints someone to one of the most sensitive diplomatic roles in the world, a role with direct access to top-level intelligence between the UK and the United States, and then never follows up on the security vetting, never picks up the phone, never asks a single official, did this person clear? The Foreign Office knew. Red flags had been raised internally, and yet the information never reached the Prime Minister's desk. Nobody thought to tell him. Nobody thought it mattered enough. That is not a communication failure. That is a complete breakdown of accountability inside this government.
It's one thing to say, as he insists on saying, nobody told me. Nobody told me anything. Nobody told me. The question is, why didn't the Prime Minister ask?
Now here is where it gets truly brutal. When Starmer stood at the dispatch box to address this, he apologized. He called the appointment a mistake. He expressed regret. But watch carefully what he did not do. He did not take personal responsibility. Instead, blame drifted quietly toward civil servants, toward officials, toward the process. Starmer essentially told Parliament, the system failed, not me. The very system he leads, the very system he is constitutionally responsible for. He broke one of the oldest rules in politics. When the ship hits the rocks, the captain does not blame the crew.
I should not have appointed Peter Mandleson. I take responsibility for that decision, and I apologise again to the victims of the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, who were clearly failed by my decision.
That half-hearted apology landed like a lead balloon inside his own party. Because Labour MPs are not stupid. They understand exactly what a non-apology apology looks like. They've spent years criticizing the Conservatives for that precise maneuver, and now they are watching their own leader perform it in real time.
Mr. Speaker, that we all face is that trust in the Prime Minister and in politics is diminishing as this sorry saga continues.
The Labour MP who challenged Starmer in the Commons didn't just raise questions about Mandleson. They raised questions about Starmer's judgment, his honesty, and his willingness to mislead Parliament. The Utswe accusation was surgical. Starmer did not lie through dramatic invention. He misled through carefully selected silence. He allowed a version of events to stand in Parliament that he knew, or should have known, was incomplete. That distinction matters legally, but to the public watching at home, it looks exactly like lying. And that optics problem is now impossible to manage.
As this scandal has unraveled, he has sought to pin the blame on everyone but himself. He has blamed the security services. He has sacked his chief of staff. He has sacked the cabinet secretary. He has now sacked Ollie Robbins, the permanent secretary of the Foreign Office. All this from a man who once said, "I will carry the can for the mistakes of any organisation I lead."
What makes this scandal different from the usual Westminster noise is how easily ordinary people can understand it. There is no complexity here that requires political knowledge to follow. A prime minister appointed a man with known Epstein connections and Russia ties to a role requiring top-secret security clearance. That man failed his vetting, The Prime Minister claims he didn't know for months, and when confronted, he blamed everyone except himself. You don't need to follow politics obsessively to recognize that as a serious problem. This is cutting through in living rooms across Britain in a way that most political scandals simply don't.
What's not adding up for me is why we are now in mid-April before we get this information, and why the Prime Minister didn't drill down to ensure that we had the security information, which clearly we learnt that Peter Mandleson had breached.
The opposition has recognized this immediately. A contempt motion is being prepared. The argument being constructed is straightforward. Starmer misled Parliament, and Parliament must hold him accountable through its own mechanisms. A vote of no confidence is being discussed openly now, not as a distant hypothetical, but as a realistic near-term possibility. The opposition is not wasting this moment. They are building momentum methodically, and every new detail that surfaces about the Mandleson appointment adds another brick to that wall.
The Prime Minister is lying, or he is so incompetent that he is unfit to run the country. Either way, his position is untenable.
But the most dangerous threat to Starmer is not sitting across the aisle from him. It is sitting right behind him. Labour MPs who won their seats on the promise of clean politics, honest government, and a complete break from Conservative sleaze are now being asked to defend something that looks indistinguishable from the culture they campaigned against. The silence on Labour's benches when their own MP challenged the Prime Minister was not just uncomfortable, it was telling. When your own people go quiet rather than defend you, the leadership crisis has already begun. The question now is simply how fast it moves.
The Prime Minister told me from the dispatch box that the security vetting he had received had revealed Mandelson's relationship with Epstein. How could he say that if he had not seen the security vetting?
There is also a deeper political wound being exposed here that goes beyond this single appointment. Why Mandleson? That is the question that refuses to go away, because Mandleson brought no obvious diplomatic credentials that justified overriding significant security concerns. What he did bring was decades of political loyalty, establishment connections, and proximity to power. The appointment looks less like a strategic decision and more like a reward. Political patronage dressed up as statesmanship. And if that is what happened, then Starmer did not just make a bad call. He placed personal and party interests above the national security of the United Kingdom. That allegation, once made clearly enough, is almost impossible to survive politically.
We needed a government of honesty, integrity and accountability. So will the Prime Minister finally accept that the only way he can help to deliver that is to resign?
An independent inquiry is now being demanded by multiple voices across Parliament. The call is for a full investigation into the process behind Mandelson's appointment. Who knew what? When they knew it? What information was withheld? And why? Starmer's team has resisted this so far. But resistance to transparency in the middle of a trust crisis never ends well. Every day he pushes back against an inquiry is another day the public is given reason to assume there is something worth hiding.
His promises to control taxes, which he has broken. His promises not to raise borrowing, which he has broken. Promises to back business, protect our veterans, defend our farmers, and prioritize growth, all of which he has broken.
Trust is the only currency a prime minister truly holds, and right now, Starmer's is rapidly depleting. Without it, policies are empty, announcements fall on deaf ears, and speeches lose their impact. The Peter Mandleson scandal has done more than just expose a botched appointment. It's illuminated every lingering doubt about whether Starmer's government offers genuine change or is merely a continuation of the same old insider dealings, just with a fresh set of faces. And that, more than anything, should worry Labour and the entire nation.